He's like, okay, put your hands down. I'm going to teach you how to take a punch. I was like,
Oh, gosh.
excuse me? And he started charging at me like the raging bull. I learned that snow can really burn when it's applied with enough fury. Yeah, I've heard success defined this is that you're constantly moving toward your goals. And
Yes.
as long as you're constantly moving toward your goals, then you're successful.
Yeah.
But what happens is the world tells us, no, you need to be moving toward these goals, to the goals that we set, the goals that we establish for you.
My best should be good enough because it's literally all I'm capable of.
Shattered to unbreakable. Listen here, sweet sister. Whether you think you have one little crack or you are shattered into a billion pieces, this podcast is going to give you the resources, tools, and skills to help piece yourself back together to form a beautiful, unique, solid, and unbreakable masterpiece. You are listening to Shattered to Unbreakable, the Reclaim Podcast. Let's talk.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Shattered to Unbreakable. I'm your host, Brandi Babin, and today I have a guest, Dr. Douglas Hamp, here. He is an author of many different books, and he's here to talk to us about one of his books, Finding Joy in Every Punch, and how that came about, and just give us some life lessons that we can use in our everyday lives to help become the best version of ourselves. So welcome, Doug. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad you're here too. And I'm really excited to hear about how this book came about. We share a common interest, which is Krav Maga. And I know that has a lot to do with this book and what's in the book and how you came about some of these methods of regulating your nervous system and how to stay calm. So I'm personally extremely excited to hear more about this book. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, and that's where one of my stories happened for sure, and which we'll get to in a second. But I love to ski. That is something that is really passionate for me. And so that's one reason I wanted to move to Colorado so that I could be closer to the mountains. And I spent some years in Israel. I got to do my master's degree at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. That was an incredible experience, and I'm very grateful for it. And as of late, I really am excited about sharing ideas and methods about leadership. And so, yeah, I wrote this book, Finding Joy in Every Punch. And it started with Krav Maga. That really helped me to, well, it didn't start there, but it helped me to really focus my message and to understand my own self and, kind of get these epiphanal moments where you're like, oh, okay, that really, well, hit hard, right? And
Yeah.
so it was great.
Amazing. Well, and how long ago was it that you wrote?
I wrote this last July, so it's
Okay.
pretty fresh. Yeah. Yep.
I did see that you have an acronym, which I love acronyms. So joy is an acronym in your book. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So joy stands for just relax, offer kindness, and yield to connection. So let me go back. So I kind of starts on the fourth grade. All right. So I was on the fourth grade in Michigan, and I had just learned a really fun family fact, which was that my Dutch grandfather's real name was Dirk. And when he
Okay.
immigrated to America, he went by a very common nickname at the time. And I thought the fifth grader in my school just needed to know this, that he was going to thank me and do cartwheels when I finally told him what his name really meant, right? So I walked up to him on a cold, wintry, snowy morning, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, Dirk, did you know that your name in English really means Dick?" And he just squinted at me and he said, "What did you just call me?" Now, I was Baptist raised. I had no idea why the other kids were forming a semicircle, like, something was going to go down. And so I just doubled down and I said, "Well, your name means Dick." And I stood there, maybe waiting for a high five or, "Wow, thank you. That was the most interesting and amazing linguistic insight to my name I've ever heard." But instead, he turned beet red and he started charging at me like the raging bull. I thought I was pretty fast, but I was not fast enough. And before you knew it, I was face down in a snowdrift getting a Michigan face washing.
No.
And that was kind of a bitter lesson.
Yeah.
And I learned that snow can really burn when it's applied with enough fury. So fast forward some years and I wanted to do martial arts. So I thought, well, which one should I do? So I got involved with Krav Maga, which I think is a wonderful discipline. I encourage people to do it.
Agreed.
Well, we were sparring and I had just finished sparring with 5 of my classmates and my instructor, Nate. He's like, I'm thinking I'm done, right? My lungs are burning. I'm like, okay, I'm done. He's like, no, you're not done. Come here. And I'm like, oh, geez, let's go. So I get in the ring with Nate and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to end poorly, right? So I'm remembering the lesson that I learned in 4th grade. And I'm just going to dance around like a caffeinated squirrel. I'm not going to get close so he can't
There
punch
you
me.
go.
Nate's not impressed, right? This guy's built like a refrigerator with arms, right? And he probably could survive an apocalypse with just some duct tape and a granola bar or
Yeah,
something.
for real.
Yeah, and so, after the round, he's just not impressed. He's like, "Okay, put your hands down. I'm gonna teach you how to take a punch." I was like,
Gosh.
"Excuse me? This is not the customer service I was looking for." And, well, I obeyed and I put my hands down and he gives me this right hook. And I'm like, "Oh," and he said, "That didn't hurt." I said, "I don't know. I think that's how pain works. I think it hurt." And he said, "Put your hands down again." And so he gives me 5 more.
Gosh. Did
And
you have
I mean,
headgear
okay, he
on or is
wasn't
this
trying to kill me. If he'd really tried to kill me, he probably would have, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but so he was pulling his punches a bit, but they still hurt. And I felt my jaw definitely later that day. I was like, "Oh yeah, he definitely clocked me really good." But I discovered something. I was more afraid of the punch, and I'm afraid of the pain and the idea of the punch than the actual punch itself. Once I actually got punched several times, I was like, "Okay, that wasn't pleasant,
Yeah,
but it didn't kill me."
right.
And it was that flinch moment. That's where I discovered that so often it's in the flinch that we are anticipating the worst possible thing, where everything's gonna fall apart. I'm gonna live under a bridge and, and we go into this panic mode. And as a result of the panic mode, we avoid that conversation that we know we should have because
Yes.
it's gonna involve something or other, or
Yes.
that email comes in, we need to talk, right? And we're like, right? And you start tensing
Mhm.
up. And so I came up with this concept of just relax, offer kindness, yield a connection. So if you can find joy in when you're getting punched, it changes the whole dynamic because
Yes.
suddenly you're not flinching. You're just like, okay, I'll probably get hit, but I'll be okay. It's not going to end me. It's not going to kill me. This isn't going to ruin my life if I get punched. All right. Yeah. Will it hurt? It might, but I'm stronger than I think. And so the first part is to just relax we have to relax our body. It starts with breathing. This is what Navy SEALs do when they're going into, enemy fire. They have to do this box breathing. So you inhale 4, you hold 4,
Mhm.
exhale 4, and then you hold 4.
And hold
And you
for
do
it,
that
yeah.
4 times and it resets your computer. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's so simple. And yet just basic breathing can ground you, right? And so
Absolutely.
that's kind of the first thing is to just understand that you're okay. And,
Yes.
I kind of remind myself this all the time. Hey, just relax, right? This thing, whatever crisis, whatever punch is coming your direction, it's going to be okay.
I love that.
Yeah, and so then I talk about the haymaker punch, right? So in a haymaker, it's this arcing swing that comes way out from the outside. It's kind of like your uncle trying to swat at a fly at a barbecue. Right? It's not a very beautiful one. And this is what happens when in an MMA bout or in a street fight when people get really sloppy. You're tired.
Mhm.
Your
Yep.
adrenaline's going. You have no form whatsoever, and you just have this really nasty looking haymaker punch. Well, when that happens, one of the safest things you can do is actually to lean in instead of leaning back. It's very counterintuitive, right? I mean, you're
It
like,
is.
okay, I want to get out of the way of this punch, but no, this punch is actually where you lean in, and what happens is instead of getting this, you're getting it right here in the crook of your arm, and as that way you're not getting the full impact. And so
Right?
when we can regulate ourselves and just say, okay, I've got this, and you lean in, you avoid the hardest part of the punch. You'll still get something, but you're going to avoid the hardest part, and
Yes.
that Again, it seems very counterintuitive,
Right.
but it really does work. And you have to learn to trust yourself a little bit. You got to
I
learn
agree.
to just relax.
It's so true. I like that you teach that because and I know you talk about this, but there's this level of stress that's not healthy. And then there's this other side of stress where if you, like you said, lean into it so that the stress doesn't raise your cortisol, it just motivates you in a different way. So you can change a stressful situation. You can make it, instead of making your nervous system heightened and release of cortisol, you can use that stress to motivate you in a different way that keeps cortisol down and it motivates you in different ways. I would like to say in Krav, yes, you always want to lean in. I mean, you always attack, right? They always teach you attack the attack. You cannot back away. And that's part of the reason why. And so I like the idea of teaching everybody else who maybe doesn't do Krav. This lean in is like lean into the stress to use it instead of running away from it and allowing it to cause you into the state of anxiety. So lean
Yeah.
into these stressful situations, lean into this uncomfortable situation with your spouse, lean into the uncomfortable situation with your kids, with a friend, with somebody at work. Lean into this email, start asking questions. Why did they send it? Maybe I need to ask this, instead of for being like, oh no, everything's gonna fall apart, like you said. So I love that analogy. It's so great.
Yeah. A Navy admiral once said, if you want to save the world, start by making your bed. You're like, what? Making your bed? What does that have to do with saving the world? Right. Or, changing the world anyway. And the whole point was there's nothing magical about your bed, but that simple act shows that you still have some agency in your life when it feels like everything is falling apart and you take the time. So, you know what? I'm going to just do this. I'm going to
Mhm.
make my bed. Or, you could put the dishes in the dishwasher, right? I
Yes.
mean, there's all kinds of just little activities that you could do to say, okay, it feels like all is lost, but I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to show that I have agency, that I still have some part to play in this unfolding crisis.
Absolutely.
And so it's again, it's just relaxing, right? Because when your life is falling apart, why would I make my bed? I'm gonna be dead tomorrow. What's the point? Like, well, do it
Right.
anyway. And you'll discover that it gives you time to breathe, it gives you time to think, it helps to regulate it. Yeah, that cortisol. See, the interesting thing about cortisol is it can be your friend or it can
Yes.
definitely be your enemy, right? It
Absolutely.
it, it shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, and kind of what happens is your inner toddler comes out and starts taking the wheel, right? And you're like, okay, this is not a good strategy. I don't want the inner toddler to be taken over and driving me off a cliff. So when you regulate and you breathe, you slow down, then you give yourself that space that you need. And sometimes all you need is a minute to just kind of just
Yes.
stop, right?
I
And
love the
then
breathing.
your brain comes back online. But I'll tell you that cortisol is incredibly effective when you're in a split-second decision, when you
Oh,
got the
yes.
you but here's the thing is, like, we're not running away from lions all day, right? And
Right,
that's when
right.
you really need it, is when you're about to become lunch, you need to move and you don't need
Mhm.
anything else. But we live in this world where stress hits us all the time, and so we think there's a lion chasing us all day long, and there isn't. And then so we don't do our best thinking when we're under that kind of stress.
Absolutely. And you talk about in your book being a leader and there's this glorification of always being, grind. I hate the
Yeah.
glorification of the grind.
Yeah.
It is not healthy. And so, but for fear of missing out, if you're an ambitious person, then you think you should be always doing something. You should always be chasing. And yes, you should always be ambitious, but at the same time, there's an unhealthy level when cortisol levels stay high is when it's dangerous. It is perfectly normal for them to dip and peak and dip, but you have to have the dip to make the peak healthy. It's when it stays peaked or stays low for too long that it isn't. So I hate the idea, first of all, that of the grind, but also, and I think a lot of us moms feel this, we think that we're supposed to be even all day long, all the time. And if you're not okay, then you're not okay. And it's like, no, we need to make sure we're normalizing the fact that a normal person does need the up and the down and the up and the down. That's how we're designed. It's okay to be super joyful one minute and super low the next. It's okay as long as you're going up and down. You don't have to be always okay and always have it together and always calm and always. So that misconception is something I really harp on. And I like the fact that you point that out, in your leadership portion of your book where you're talking about we don't have to be chasing this high level, overwhelming, ambitious grind.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so Ariana Huffington, she started the Huffington Post. She was grinding away, just working, working all the time, and she kind of worked herself into exhaustion where she literally fainted and collapsed onto her desk and woke up with a broken jaw. And she kind of had a reset at that point. She's like, "Is this what success looks like?" Right?
Mm,
We work so hard to do these things, and our world definitely glorifies it.
yeah.
Where, like, so and so accomplished this, but we sometimes, we can only see the outside and, okay, yeah, they built company XYZ, it looks really impressive, but then they died 2 years later, or their family's in complete shambles,
Yes.
or I mean, again, a lot of things can happen, I get that, but sometimes we sacrifice the things that mean the most
Yeah.
for something that looks really great. It sounds great, but it doesn't have lasting impact. And something else that we can do is very simple. And this is where, kind of ancient wisdom comes in is just take a break, take a day
Yes.
off.
Yes.
The Bible calls it the Sabbath. And, whether you take the seventh day Sabbath, but take a Sabbath, okay, you have to do that. And if you won't regulate your body, then your body will regulate you, just like what happened to Ariana Huffington. And you have to take that time. And this idea that I got to grind 24/7, it's not going to work. Something's going to break. I promise you, something will break. So
Yes.
take that time, relax, and then pick up, with the next thing.
Absolutely. So somebody was talking about if you want to really truly be great at something, you have to make it your whole life. And that really started me thinking because I've always wanted to be great. I feel like I have it in me to be great. And then I started realizing, well, if I want to be great, I have to give up a lot of other things,
Uh-huh.
including time with my kids, including, getting an education or some of my hobbies that I have. If I really want to be the greatest of the great, I have to make it my entire life. You have to be obsessed, delusionally obsessed. And I'm like, I don't know that I want that. And so I had to
Yeah.
like you said, reevaluate what does success look like to you? Not what
Yeah.
does success look like to society or to the media or to your next door neighbor or your mom or your dad. What does success look like in your life when you're on your deathbed? What could you look back and be like, I really killed it, you know?
Yeah. I've heard success defined this is that you're constantly moving toward your goals. And
Yes.
as long as you're constantly moving toward your goals, then you're successful. But what happens is the world tells us, no, you need to be moving toward these goals, to the goals that we set, the goals that we establish for you. And that may look like, being the absolute best of the best of the best in your field. And you know what? I realize, I'm an expert in some fields. Am I the top in the world? No, you know, and that's okay. I don't have to be the best in the world. I can be good at what I do without having to try to get to the top of the mountain and play king of the hill. Because the problem, if you've ever played that game, there's always somebody there who's waiting to knock you off your throne. And so if we
Absolutely.
don't make that the goal to be the absolute top, the best, well, then I don't have to defend that throne. I can still be pretty good,
Yeah.
but I mean, isn't that good enough? But
And it is,
these are the
yeah.
lies we tell ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, my mom always used to tell me, "You don't have to be the best, you just have to do your best. As long as you're doing your best, then that's enough. But if you're trying to be the best, that's a moving target, and who knows, your best might be leaps and bounds above their best, but you're just stopping when you beat them because that's what your goal was. Just keep being your best, and who knows, it could be the best by a landslide and nobody could even touch you, but you wouldn't know if you were competing with somebody else. So
Yeah.
I always kept that in mind, like my best should be good enough because it's literally all I'm capable of.
Yeah, and when you find that inner motivation, you begin to realize you're like, "Okay, I've gotten to this level. I think I could go to another level."
Yeah,
and it becomes much more satisfying. It's gratifying because you're not chasing after somebody else's dream and you're not trying to compete. That is something that our world tells us, that we have to compete. We've got to, beat out the next guy. But I really think we could have a world where we don't have to try to beat the next person, but we could help each other up. I mean, it sounds
absolutely.
great. It's on posters and, makes for nice motivational talks. But then we get right back into the grind and like, well, I got to beat this other guy. And
Yes,
it happens in every field,
for sure.
that we've got to be better than the next guy or they're going to take my lunch. Like, well, yeah, I mean, that does happen. But what if we all stop trying to take each other's lunch and try to
Yeah,
help make lunch for each other? I
right.
mean,
Let's just share
we
lunch.
really could do this differently.
That's
And
true.
that actually takes me into the next thing, which is offer kindness. So
Hmm.
offer kindness, I also call it don't kick the dog. So
Yeah.
imagine this scenario where, let's say the husband comes home, he had a lousy day at work, he got barked at, and so he comes home, he's gruff with his wife, and then maybe she says something, and then the oldest child goes and picks on the middle kid picks on the baby cries, and then it gets back to the husband and then he goes and kicks the dog, like what'd the dog do,
Yeah.
right? The dog didn't do anything. But what happens is pressure has to go somewhere. And so what happens is, if I got picked on, I'm going to pick on somebody else. If I was embarrassed, I'm going to go embarrass somebody else. If I was challenged or corrected, maybe I'm going to go be sarcastic towards somebody else because I want to pass that on. And it's never somebody above me. I'm always going to do it to somebody who I consider to be lesser than myself. And that's why the dog gets kicked, because he's the lowest on the totem pole.
Yeah.
And so there's something about when I say offer kindness, it's not just that, the coffee mug kind of kindness or something that HR wants you to do. You guys got to be kind once a year. It's really more this idea of don't pass that pressure on. There's an incredible amount of strength and learning that you can take a punch and not give a punch, right? That's where strength comes in. And this is where my Krav Maga training has really helped me to just see this in very clear terms, right? Like there's a punch coming at you, right? And the punch is obviously metaphor for life and all the challenges
Yeah,
and
sure.
hurdles that we have. And when you can absorb that and not pass on that sting, not pass on that zinger, and there's really something about that. It's called maturity. That's what it looks like, is to just, grow up in that sense.
Yes.
And
Healthy restraint.
in a leadership position, this is where, okay, if the people above us, whether it's the board, the CEO or whoever it may be, or,
Hmm.
God, I don't know, figure out
Yeah.
something, but you took something happened and you didn't like it. And so now you want to go just kind of pass that, send it downstream. Well, don't.
Hmm.
This is where, as a leader, and where, whatever kind of leader you are, even if you're a student, you can be a student leader. You don't have to have an official position, but just be the leader. Be the leader. And what's amazing is people start to take notice. When people feel like they're working in an organization, if we're in a kind of a corporate setting, or if it's a religious setting, or if it is a sports setting, but when they see somebody who exhibits these qualities, that person starts to rise to the top. And you begin to realize that just, having that fortitude to not pass that on, to know who you are, a lot
Hmm.
of this comes down to knowing who you are.
It's so true.
I know who I am, right? And I don't have anything that I have to prove. It makes such a difference.
Yes.
So, offer kindness. If, again, whatever your position, go and ask people how they're doing. Say, I'm glad you're here today. Some of those little things can pay off in such amazing ways. If you're in a high stress corporate setting and maybe you're the manager or you're the team leader or you're the CEO, sometimes just walking around the facility and taking a genuine interest in people,
Absolutely.
what it does
That's
is it
what
gives
gets
them
hard with
agency.
corporate.
And
Yeah,
when they begin to feel like you actually care and that they actually matter, they start working at a whole different level,
they
right? And
do.
that when that motivation becomes internal, they stop showing up just as an employee, punching in, punching out, and they can hardly wait till they can get out of there. When they see that there's real empathy, this is what Satya Nadella did at Microsoft. This is where for years, people at Microsoft, they would kind of meet up in the parking lot and they would talk about maybe we should quit today, because this place is so toxic.
Oh no.
Satya Nadella came in and he changed the entire corporate culture to one of empathy. Now, not weakness, right? These are words, these buzzwords that are like, oh, that's weak. I can't do that. People walk all over me. No, you keep your authority, but what you do is you now start acting with empathy and it changes the dynamic. And now, I mean, their stock is up 3 times, right? So it's increased 300%. That's pretty amazing. And now people, I mean, every company has its problems, but it's now a good place to work instead of this really toxic place to work. And this happens at so many places when they feel that their voice actually matters. It doesn't mean that you always say yes, but it means that you're actually listening to them. You're considering them. It really makes a huge difference.
It really does. I've been taking some classes on industrial and organizational psychology, which is all about keeping your workers happy. So then that also increases productivity and efficiency and helps the budget. It's like this, effect that just ripples down.
So another thing about offering kindness is the leader's mood is amazingly contagious, right? So
Yes.
if the leader comes in and he's, just an emotional wreck, maybe he had a tough time at home or in traffic,
Yes.
or he got a terrible email with the quarterly reports, whatever it may be, whatever he brings in, or she, right, whoever this leader is, brings this
Mhm.
into the office environment, to the organization. It definitely is contagious and people will catch
Absolutely.
it very quickly. And so this is something where as leaders, we have to learn to, bite our lip a little bit and to be careful. If you're in a meeting and you're looking at your phone and you're just scoffing, well, that energy then permeates throughout the organization. I mean,
Yeah.
incredibly fast, right?
Yes.
So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, this is one of those things where we have to really just check ourselves as leaders.
Absolutely. I agree. I have a restaurant in Biloxi. And I've noticed that, the more involved I am and the more I support them and I just made it a point to say, like, I don't want any of my staff to feel like they're my staff. Like we all have an equally important job at this restaurant. If even one of them doesn't show up, we don't run right. And so they're all equally important. I don't care what your title is or what your pay is. We're equally important in this business. And so I have the best team ever. When I hear other people that own restaurants talk about their team, they're like, "Oh my gosh." And I'm like, "Really? I have none of those problems." But, when talking with my team, they're like, "Because you care about us and we have autonomy and we get to make choices." And, my team runs my restaurant as if it was their restaurant. But I also share in bonuses and I share in profits and I share, it's just I don't see it as my restaurant. I see it as our restaurant. And I think that that mentality, not to toot my own horn, I'm just saying like I've noticed that that mentality has leaked through to everyone and now we all run it like it's our restaurant. So it really does work.
Yeah. Yeah, and basically you've seen this in action, you've learned it, and it's exciting when you can say, "Oh, I learned that lesson," right? Because I remember being an employee at whether it's a restaurant or various, places that I've worked in my life. And I kinda had this feeling like, if you would just say thank you once in a while, or if you would acknowledge that what I'm doing makes a difference.
Yes.
I mean, to be honest, this is years ago, right? But in just kind of my mind, it was like, I would work even harder if you actually just
Yes.
appreciated me, and a lot of times it's not about having a bigger paycheck or even getting that financial bonus. I mean, we all need money, but a lot of people will show up and they'll come in as owners if you give them some of that. And just kindness is this very simple thing where you don't have to give away the farm, but you have high standards, but still you're appreciating people and treating them as if they're human and that
Absolutely.
they're making a difference.
Yes, and there's some instances where the people who do a great job, they may get praised, but they also get more work because they're making
Mhm.
up for the people who are not doing a very good job. And I feel like that leads into your next the why part is is that connection. If the owner can come in and take some of that burden versus just be like, well, since they're not doing or they keep calling out, call her, she'll just do it. She does everything. Instead of doing that, the owner comes in, works alongside her, and helps her feel supported. That has gone so much better than just saying, well, let's just keep piling the stuff on the one we can count on. Get in there and connect. So talk a lot about talk to us a little bit about the connection piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yield to connection. This is where when you really begin to understand who you are, you don't have to prove yourself anymore. And this is where, training in Krav Maga with my instructor, Nate, who's again built like the tank, he doesn't have to prove himself. He knows who he is. And, he's not getting in the ring to make a statement, right? He
Right.
could care less. And this is where when you finally understand who you are, you're not afraid to pass the mic. You're not afraid to pass the ball. You're not afraid to let the spotlight be on somebody else. And when we can do that, we find ourselves not competing for all of the attention. I mean,
Yeah.
this is just basic narcissism, right? So
Yeah.
when we
For
can
real.
stop being the narcissist, and I think we're all narcissists to some degree, right? Some
Yes.
are a whole lot more than others. The point, though, is that when we can say, it's okay, I know who I am, and I don't have to come in and everyone always has to look to me. And so this is where, as the leader, when we can yield to connection, we can let somebody else have an idea. Or we can come in and let's say we're having a team meeting, and instead of just coming with all the answers in the agenda, this is what we're going to do, people, open it up and say, well, are there any ideas out there? And genuinely listen. It doesn't mean that you have to go with those ideas, but you might discover when your recipe for success or your agenda comes in somewhat half baked, that when other people can then maybe take some of those general ideas and then they can expand upon them. Again, they feel agency, they feel empowered, they feel like they were listened to. They feel like, wow, hey, the boss actually listened to me. My idea got implemented. This is really cool. Right. And then they start strutting around, hey, this was actually my idea. Or, the boss thought my idea was really
Excellent.
good and now we're doing it. It changes the whole dynamic, right? And it's so easy on paper, right? And it's actually quite easy in practice, except for that thing called pride, where like, oh, it's got to be me. This is my company, my restaurant, my business. But if you will just release some of that and yield to some of that, right? Because the whole word yield, it sounds like, wait, I don't want to yield. That means I'm going to give up power. I don't get to be the boss. No, you still get to be the boss. The buck will still stop with you. But when you allow for others to have input, you allow for others to get the spotlight or to get the microphone, then they are empowered and they act totally different.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I love connection, period. I've learned about connection in parenting as well. And it really is, you know, the most important part of parenting is the connection piece because that's where the child feels heard, understood, seen. And that's made the biggest difference in my parenting versus the whole because I said so. It's like, okay, here's why this rule is in place. It's because I love you.
Hmm.
And that's why we have these rules. It's not because I like being mean or like making you do things. This is to keep you safe or to keep you healthy. And it's because I love you. And then they're like, oh, okay, mom's not mean.
Yeah, exactly. And so this takes us all back to the whole flinching, right?
Mhm.
And that was the big lesson I learned, that I was more afraid of the punch than the punch itself. It was the concept, the idea of it that made me just kind of, flinch. And so when you can learn to just relax, breathe, slow down, take a break, you don't have to be frantically working 24/7 or everything's going to fall apart.
Right?
You have to breathe, you have to stop, you have to, go out and smell those roses and that kind of stuff. And, I
Yeah.
went for a walk, a walk the other night. I still had some work, but I was gonna go for a walk. It was beautiful. I mean, this is the great thing about Colorado. It was like 75 degrees the other night. The moon was gorgeous, and now it's snowing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's Colorado for you. It's so funny how that works. But I just took in that nice fresh air. I enjoyed the scenery and the moon, and it was good. It helped reset my internal regulation system, and we have to do that, and And so then offer kindness, right? It's okay. You can hold on to that pressure instead of passing it down the line. Don't kick the
Right.
dog.
Yeah.
And then yield the connection. Let somebody else in your organization have it. Because really what this comes down to is, are you secure in who you are? And that's why we sometimes have the toxic boss or the toxic workplace, because there's fear
Yes.
and
Fear is
there's
terrible.
insecurity,
Right.
and people feel it, and people, they need the paycheck, so they stick around, but they're on LinkedIn looking for another job,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
They're
for sure.
they're looking for something else. And what does that lead to? It leads to burnout. It leads to churn, right? You have people come in and go out, and of course that leads to your bottom line. You have to if you have to retrain employees all the time,
Yeah.
well, that is costing you
It's
money.
so costly, absolutely, and not to mention, like, mistakes made by new people, which are gonna happen, it's not their fault, they're just learning. Those are costly, it's this whole thing, and so, yeah, just the connection, making people feel loved, and that's, like, all places of life, in your marriage, in relationships with your kids, with friends, it's at work, it's these life lessons that are in your book that literally help you in every aspect of life. And for the listeners who've been with me for a while, if you will notice this theme of every single person that's been on the podcast talks about the way to become the best version of yourself is to know yourself. You have to know and love who you are. And that's what Reclaim is all about. And, finding joy in every punch. You've got to know, love, trust yourself. That's huge in Krav also. I remember I was so afraid to go to sparring. I was so afraid. And just like you said, it's because I didn't want to get hit. And I would
Yeah.
watch sparring and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're punching each other in the head, in the face. Like you're wearing
Yeah.
headgear, but you're getting
Yeah.
punched in the face, and you're getting
Yeah.
kicked in the side and in the shins and my gosh, like getting punched in the side. And we don't have, body gear. You're just getting punched in the kidneys. Like I was like, I don't want to. But, Hank and Leo would just pressure me, like, "You've gotta get to sparring, you have to get to sparring, you have to feel what it's like to get punched, and then you won't be afraid of it. You just have
Yep.
to do it a couple times." And
Yep.
I
Yeah.
finally went to sparring, and I was terrified because the girls in sparring are bigger than me, and they're stronger than me, and they're faster than me, and they have more aggression than I do, and so I was just like, "I'm gonna get rocked. I'm gonna get rocked." And I don't like, I really don't want to. But like you said, it didn't hurt because I had headgear on. It didn't hurt. It shook and it vibrated, and I was like, "Okay." And even, like, the kicks, you think they're gonna hurt really bad. And yes, I mean, there's a certain level of pain, and I've been told I have a high pain tolerance, so maybe I'm not being realistic, but it didn't hurt so much as the impact was scarier to think about than it was to actually feel. So the impact of getting kicked or punched in the side, it actually didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It just that the jarring is what's unexpected is the jar of getting hit and the vibration of your head being like, bam. And so
Yeah.
now I'm
Right.
not afraid to get into sparring, even if I'm terrible. And the girl that I'm sparring with is like a black belt. I'm still not afraid to get in there because if I get hit 15 times in the head, I'm like, oh, well, at least I got that one good hook in. So it's just like you said, like expose yourself to the idea that these punches of life are not going to be as bad as you think they are. Going through my divorce was absolute terror, but looking back, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. I thought all these terrible things were going to happen. I thought he had more control than he actually had. I thought that the justice system couldn't help, and over time it has, but all the stress, all the anxiety, all the fear of what could happen was more detrimental than the actual punches of life were. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
love how that's your all-encompassing focus of don't be afraid of the punch. Don't be afraid to experience the punches of life. Just lean in, take a deep breath, show kindness first, yield to connection, and then see what the impact feels like. Then see what it feels like. And then you'll know what to do from there. But it's definitely moment by moment. When you're somebody who's afraid of the future, looking at tomorrow is too scary. Just take the next moment and just moment by moment.
Said.
That's how I feel about all that. Well, I appreciate you, Doug. And you have more books coming out. And I'm really excited about the one that you have that just came out. Remind me of the title for it's for people who are getting divorced or newly divorced.
Yeah. So that's called Set Free. It's coming out in April. Set
Okay.
Free, what the Bible really teaches about divorce and remarriage.
Perfect. I
And
love that.
yeah, tough topic, right? But what happens though is the Bible is actually a lot more sympathetic than you might realize, or that a lot of people might realize. For those of us who were raised in the church, I mean, I grew up Baptist, and so the idea of divorce was pretty close to murder, right? I mean, like there was like murder and then there's divorce, right? Like it's and in some cases are like, I don't know, maybe divorce is worse, right? Like that
Right.
was kind of the unpardonable sin. And, so I'm obviously a Bible scholar and I like to go deep into things. I want to go back into the language. I want to understand it. And a lot of the discussion has just been left out. We haven't really gotten to the bottom of it. So this isn't to give people a carte blanche, like you can just get divorced whenever you feel like it. Like, stay in there and fight for your marriage. But there is a point where the covenant of marriage is dead. And the best thing you can do is realize that you kind of have a cadaver called your marriage in your living room and it's not moving. And you can decide that, well, maybe I should bury this thing. Maybe, it's time to put this away. I'm using that metaphorically. Okay. I'm not saying anything against your spouse. Okay. So to make that
Love
really
it.
clear. Okay. A little disclaimer. Right. But yeah, I'm hoping that this will give people some clarity, give some peace and
That's what I
help
like.
them to make a really more informed decision. Either way, if you can hang in there and fight for it, do that. Right.
Absolutely.
Learn to take those punches. Okay. And there's
Yeah.
going to be punches in every relationship. But there's also a point where you're like, you know what? I think this one is kind of down for the count. So
Yeah. This is detrimental to my health at this point.
yeah. Yeah. I'm just taking a
Yes,
beating for nothing. Right?
I know. I agree. I appreciate you being on today. Is there just one last message you would like to leave with the listeners before we sign off?
Yeah. I think, again, for me, it was don't flinch. You're stronger than you think. That was a big one. You really are. You're stronger than you think, but we're so afraid of getting hit metaphorically, right? Whatever that is. But hang in there, breathe through it. You'll discover that you got more in you than you thought.
I love that. Yes, take that box breathing is huge, you guys. If you haven't tried it, try it now. Just 4 counts, breathe in, hold 4 counts, 4 counts, breathe out, hold 4 counts. You might feel like you're about to die on the hold 4 counts, but you won't. Go ahead and get your copy of Finding Joy in Every Punch by Dr. Douglas Hamp. And then just thank you. Thank you for being a guest on today.
Thank you.
We will see you guys next week. Don't forget to stay sparkly.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. I just wanted to remind you about the resources we have on the reclaimstrategy.com. That is Reclaim University with free downloads. It's the Reclaim Guidebook, access to Kintsugi classes and events. So go ahead and take a look. Also, please share this podcast with anybody that you think might need to hear these messages. And if you haven't already and you think we deserve it, give us a 5-star rating. That just helps our reach. So I love you guys. Stay sparkly, and we will see you next week.